I just wanted to go through and show y'all my process from taking footage like this and getting it to look like this. It's really just 4 easy steps, so let me just go ahead and hop into Resolve and show y'all what's going on. The footage that you're going to be seeing is from a just like monologue, a B-roll style posts that I've been working on, and let me just go through a couple clips. Let me hop into my other timeline really fast that I've got prepared. So starting out with this first one, this is a very basic node tree that I have set up for this whole thing, and you don't have to follow this exact node tree. This is just like, again, very simple one that I've been using. And since this first clip that we're looking at, this shower clip, is a Blackmagic RAW, a B-RAW clip, I am going to use some CSTs. Yeah, that first step is going to be a CST in, which I have, since I'm using Blackmagic Pocket 4K, shot film Gen 5. So the color space is going to be Blackmagic Gen 4/5, and then the input gamma is going to be film Gen 5. And then we are just converting that to DaVinci Wide Gamut, and then I have another CST that's going to be at the very end of my node tree. That is my CST out, which is taking that DaVinci Wide Gamut and converting it into Rec 709 and Gamma 2.4. So let me go ahead and just explain this node tree really fast. I've got noise reduction up here. I'm not personally using it on this clip. It just didn't really need it. But from there, I have my actual just primaries and log corrections, just getting my image corrected so that I can then do the real creative stuff, which is the film retro edit. So first off, I just went ahead and darkened it a little bit, and just, I believe, just through the offset wheel. Yeah. So I've just dropped the offset a little bit here. And then the second one, a little bit more correction, a little bit more offset, but that was only after I was in the log wheels doing some adjustments in the shadows. So really, I was just trying to get the image a little bit darker, a little bit contrastier. And then these other 2 nodes are just not being used, so let me just turn those back on. Show you that they are not being used, but they're there to do any like tint or temperature adjustments. I just left this as is because, again, it's a very simple edit, and I'm just dirtying up the footage in the first place, so I'm not really too worried about the most solid starting point. And that's a pretty good thing about this style of edit is it doesn't really matter what kind of footage you're starting with, as long as it's exposed correctly, it should be good. All right, from those primary adjustments, we're going into our CST out, and then after the CST out is when I'm going to do everything else, just so it matches up with this other footage that I have that's shot on just a Panasonic Lumix, the camera that you're looking at right now, or that you're seeing right now. That just goes straight into a Rec 709 profile like any other consumer camera. So yeah, we have that CST out going to Rec 709, Gamma 2.4, and then from there, this is where the actual cool stuff happens, which again, it's very simple. I just have 3 separate things that I like to do. First off, I usually like to soften up the footage a little bit. I'm going to turn this node on. Usually you would just go into the blur tab on the color page. I try and stay below 0.55. Going above that can make things a little bit just like too blurry. But one of those key characteristics of old like 16 mil and 8 mil cameras and stuff like that is that they didn't have the greatest lenses, and usually they're manual focus, so people weren't getting focused completely sharp. So generally I just usually add some softness just to start out. Once we've added that softness, I go straight into the film grain. I'm going to start with a blank node just so y'all can see what I'm starting from. Default, it's going to be set to 16 millimeter. You want to change that to 35 millimeter 400T. And then from there, all I do is bump up the opacity to 100. And then I bump up the grain strength up to around like 0.504. That works. As you can see, it's a pretty strong grain, especially at, like, from here, all I'm going to do is mess with the opacity. I generally just keep it at 100 because I like that heavy grain, but it's up to you. Grain is going to increase perceived sharpness, so it's kind of funny. We're softening it first, and then the grain is kind of bringing some of that sharpness back. It's your brain tricking yourself. I don't know if you've ever seen when you add a sharpening type effect to something it usually is just adding grain. And that's why they're not very desirable most of the time. So once you've gotten that grain added, I'm going to go ahead and delete this node just because I already have my own setup and it's labeled and everything. Brings up another good point. Just keep yourself organized through all this. You can get out of hand with the nodes. Don't be doing all of this on one single node. That's the reason why you can split it up into a tree. It's a great thing about Resolve. From here, we've got halation. So when you first add halation, let me go ahead and look it up. Halation. Let's go ahead and add that. I'm going to turn off the first one just so we can start from scratch. So generally, I go straight to view isolated regions just so I can see where I want my threshold. Threshold is going to be the like a limit that you're setting this to. So I don't like it to be too. I get around like 0.5 and above, maybe a little bit below 0.5 sometimes, depending on what you're grading. Strength and all of this stuff, I generally just keep it as is. Like it usually is doing a pretty good job. Let me go through this whole clip and show you specifically a part with the chain. I really like what it does to highlights. What is actually happening on a piece of film is the highlights are lighting up the surrounding crystals as the light goes through and bounces around on that piece of celluloid. So it's making those high contrast areas glow a little bit because the light is physically traveling through the film crystals. So that's what halation is doing. When you put it on, it's trying to mimic that. And I think the thing that's really convincing about what I'm trying to do is I usually bump up the secondary glow. I think that's what makes it look pretty convincing to around like 0.225, somewhere in that range will give you a pretty realistic effect. It's not going to look too red like it sometimes does. Yeah, just a very pleasing glow. And I think that's really not a huge difference, but it sells it. So I'm going to go ahead and reset that. I'm going to go back to my node just because I like the settings that I already had. But like I said, you can just play around with these, but I'm going to push just a little bit of warmth into the offset. It's the very last thing that I want to do. So as you can see, it just kind of makes the whole thing a little bit just more orangey, a little bit more vibey. Which I might not do it on that one. We're going to keep it for now. So I'm just going to move on to this next one. This is where the 8-bit footage starts. These next three clips I recorded on my Panasonic Lumix. It's GX85. It's nothing. Again, it's just a consumer camera. You're getting a standard MP4 file, Rec 709 color, all that. So I don't need to use a color space transform or anything like that, but I still need to go through and do some just primary adjustments. I basically just bumped up the contrast. That's not actually what I did. Let me go ahead and show you just the adjustments that I did so all I did was just pull down the offset. I really didn't mess with anything else. So there's that again. And then we've got our first step, which is the softness. And this is generally going to be the same settings on all three clips. Pretty much just use the same three nodes. So there's with the grain, and then there's with the halation and the color. So these ones I really like. Adding the tint, you have to stay subtle with it or else it will start to fall apart. Like watch as I push it a little bit more, the color change is just not as pleasing and you start to see some artifacting very, very fast. Let me go ahead and reset that offset, and then I'm going to add this on a different node like I did in that last clip. Okay, I like that. I think that's a pretty good spot to leave it at. All right, and moving on to the next one, we'll go ahead and just do this one again step by step. So here are my primary adjustments, not very much. I think I just, again, pulled down offset. Yep, that's exactly what I did. And then I added a little bit of softness, and then I went ahead and added the grain, and then I went ahead and added the halation. As you can see, it's really not doing much. There's only 3 nodes, and then you just have to play with those 3 nodes and get it to a point where you like it. Basically mimic exactly what I'm doing here. And this is one of my favorite ones. So there is a primary adjustments. Again, I just pulled down offset. I'm not doing a whole lot there. It's just spreading out the image, making it less compressed. I have bumped my saturation down in camera just so I can get a little bit more dynamic range. So again, we added a little bit of softness. We added some grain. We added some halation. So again, it's pretty simple. These 3 nodes were the same throughout all of these clips. I did change the first 2. I took the color push and put it after the node. You really shouldn't be keeping it within the same node. I kind of liked how it worked though. I think it just did something a little bit different with the halation that I liked. So experiment. Definitely learn the ins and outs of Resolve before you really start just playing around, or else it can get really overwhelming and really disorganized very quickly. So I do recommend you go check out somebody like Casey Ferris or Darren Moston specifically for color. Casey Ferris will give you a more broad explanation of Resolve, but again, for color, I would stick to Darren Moston. He's a great resource. He'll explain everything very technically, but also well, so you're not walking away confused from his video. But yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and run back through these clips really fast, just show you a before and after.
As we're going over these before and afters, I just wanted to say I think I could have added a little bit more halation. This is Casey in the post process. If y'all have any questions, let me know in the comments. Go ahead and like and subscribe, and yeah, I'll see y'all later.